If your goal is to customize the single product page, then here is how you can use the visual hook guide for the single product page in order to add content to it. As you can see, the visual hook guide is exactly the same as the front-end single product page, with the difference being the list of hooks and their exact positions inside the single product page. For example, you might find a hook in between the add to cart and the product meta called WooCommerce after add to cart button, and we will use this in our example. Also, if you keep scrolling down, you will see the list of WooCommerce default functions that are hooking into the provided hooks. For example, you can find out that WooCommerce is displaying the title of the product thanks to a function called WooCommerce template single title, which is hooking into the WooCommerce single product summary with priority 5. Where is the single product summary hook? Is right here. So let's move on to an example. As I said, I want to print some content in between the add to cart and this section, which is called the product meta. Okay, so what I do, I go to my visual hook guide, I look at the list of hooks that are in between these two sections, which is these 5 hooks, and pick one. Now, as you can see, there are some hooks specific to variable products, like after single variation and after variations form. So I don't want to use those. I want to do this for all products. So what I'm going to select is, for example, the WooCommerce after add to cart button. So what I do, I just copy this. And if you watched the previous lessons, you will know that I'm now going to my FTP, look for my child in root folder and the functions.php file. I right click, I edit, and open this file in my favorite code editor, and I paste my hook. That's the position where I want to print my new content. In order to print content here, first of all, I need to call the add action WordPress function. This add action requires the name of the hook in between quotes, then the name of your hooked function. For example, you can call it Bloomer content between add cart and product meta. Close the quotes, close the bracket, and semicolon. In this way, what we're doing is we're telling WooCommerce to select this position, and in that position to call this function. So this function must exist, and I'm going to write it now. This is how you write a function in PHP. The function has always open bracket, close bracket, and here is where I'm going to print my content. Now, in PHP, to print content, you just write echo. And after this echo, quotes. In between quotes, you can put any HTML or any function. In my case, and I always recommend to do this, you just start by printing text. So I'm going to echo test. I'm going to save functions.php. I'm going to upload the file back to the server. And I now go to my test website and do a refresh. And if everything went smoothly, I'm now getting my additional content right in the position that I wanted, or almost right, which is after the add to cart and before the product meta. Okay, so let's imagine this position is not really correct because I want the test to go to the next line. Okay, so maybe I picked the wrong hook. I go back to the visual hook guide, and instead of the after add to cart button, I'm going to use the WooCommerce after add to cart form. So I copy this. I go back to my PHP, and I don't need to do anything else. I just going to remove this position and add the new one. Does that make sense? I'm going to save, upload the file back, and I'm going to refresh the website. And this time I would expect that my test is correctly under the add to cart and above the product meta. So you've seen it's nothing special. Every time you work with hooks and complex functions, always test that you can and are able to print some quick HTML on the screen in the exact position that you want. Because if this doesn't work, then even the rest of your function is not going to work. Of course, you can customize this and start adding some HTML. For example, I want to add a paragraph, open and close, and maybe you want to wrap that into a div with a class. If you're using single quotes for the echo, then inside you need to use double quotes. Otherwise, you will get an error. So, for example, I want to apply a div with a class of my new banner and put that into a paragraph and then close the div. This is very important. You have to make sure there is no HTML errors. For example, sometimes you might forget to close a div and the whole system, the whole single product page will look broken. Now, what if you want to currently or to temporarily disable what you've just done? You just comment this action out. How do you do comments in PHP? We've seen that in the intro to PHP lesson. You just do double / and as you can see, because my notepad has syntax highlighting, it basically comments out this action. So this function is never going to be called. Okay, so for now I still want to see it, and I want to do some more complex stuff. So this is the test, which this time is going to become a title, and after this title I want to keep echoing stuff, right? So this time, instead of echoing HTML, I want to echo a shortcode. So there is a great WordPress function called do shortcode that once used in between the brackets, you can actually put your shortcode in there. So whatever your shortcode is called, you can just put it in there and it will echo your shortcode. Now, I've opened my div with the title, which maybe this time has a heading 3. So close heading 3. And I want to close the div not there, but at the end. So I'm just going to do this. I go to the next line, and I want to basically wrap my whole new banner in a div. I forgot the closing tag for HTML, so remember to close it. And if you double click on it, it'll remind you if you've done it. Okay, so at this stage I save, I upload back to the server, and I refresh my page, and as you can see, I have a whole new section. And if you had a shortcode called your shortcode in here, it'll actually display whatever you want. So as you can see, this is quite simple to do. Once again, define a position, for example, in between the you might also like section and the related products. Go to the visual hook guide and scroll down until you see the you might also like section and find out if there are hooks that belong to this section and that are in between the upsells and the related products. In this case, you can even expand and find out that the function that is outputting the upsells uses the hook WooCommerce after single product summary, and the function that outputs the related products is using the exact same hook but with a different priority. So if you use the add action with the same hook and a priority that is in between 15 and 20, and I'm going to copy this and paste it onto my PHP. If you use something in between 15 and 20, let's say 17, and hook here your function, that, guess what, I'm going to call the same thing as this. So if you create a function, you can reuse it in other hooks. So what this is going to do is going to take the position after the single product summary and exactly with priority 17, so in between the upsells and the related products, and it's going to trigger my function content between add to cart and prod meta, which I can rename into something better than that. So I'm going to save and I'm going to upload the file back. And now that I'm going to the front end and refresh, I should now see something in between those two sections, and here you are. So as you can see, you can apply HTML, which means you can echo text, images, and anything that you can create with an HTML. You can even echo a shortcode, and of course you can do some more complex stuff that we will see in the next module.